Good evening. My name is Pierre Larsen. I'm the Director for Institutional Engagement here at America Society. I wanted to give you all a warm welcome. It's nice to see people in this salon. Not in the numbers that we would like, but and I see that you still have to social distance, but at least it's good that we can all be together in the same room. Tonight is a really special evening for us because we present a book that represents a milestone in our trajectory as a publisher of art books. This is a really ambitious book, both in its size and its content. So congratulations to Aimé and to her team. They've worked incredibly hard on the book, but also on the exhibition that you probably saw in the gallery on the first floor. And if you haven't yet, you really should before it closes on May 21st. In a moment, you will hear from Aimé directly and from two of the artists featured in the book, Sylvia Palacios Whitman and Nitza Tufiño. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Before giving them the floor, I would like to introduce Lucy Hunter, who is the managing director at ISLA. ISLA is the Institute for Studies on Latin American Art, and they've been an extraordinary partner on this project. The book we will be discussing tonight is co-published by America Society and ISLA with their fiscal, archival, and research support. So, Lucy.
It's really great to see everybody, and I realize I haven't talked to a group of people in 2 years, so I hope I remember how to use a microphone. Yes, as Pierre mentioned, and thank you, Pierre, for that introduction. My name is Lucy Hunter, and I'm the Managing Director of the Institute for Studies on Latin American Art, or ISLA. And we're proud to be neighbors of America Society. We're located on 78th and Madison, where we have an array of exhibitions, as well as research programs, university partnerships, and, of course, publications. And all of these broad activities really boil down to a single mission. Our goal is to tell richer and fuller histories of modern and contemporary art. And we try to do this by creating platforms for the work of people from Latin America and its diasporas to be seen and to be heard. And this text, This Must Be the Place, An Oral History of Latin American Artists in New York, 1965 to 75, so beautifully and expertly does that. Aimé, your years of research have gone very well spent, and it's so beautifully realized in this text. And alongside essays by Harper Montgomery, Yasmin Ramirez, and Abigail Lapin-Dardashti, as well as the editors Chia Jojima and Karen Marta, and the entire team at America Society, including Natalia Vera Salgado, Rachel Remick, Sofia Del Riester, and Todd Bradway, who worked really tirelessly on this book as well, alongside Garrick Gott, the fantastic designer. And so we're just so excited how this book lays a crucial foundation for future scholars and students, and really anyone captivated by art in New York City, which is to say, a lot of people can enjoy this book. And thank you so much, of course, to Nitza Tufiño and Sylvia Palacios Whitman for sharing your voices and your experiences tonight. And so without further ado, I will introduce the two editors of the book who will give a few more remarks before the panel begins. Chia Jojima is Assistant Curator at America Society and a PhD candidate in art history at the Graduate Center CUNY, specializing in modern and contemporary Latin American art. She has published her writings at ISLA's journal, Vistas, Critical Approaches to Latin American Art, America Society, El Museo del Barrio, among others. She has received fellowships and awards from the SAIC in Chicago and Patricia Phelps de Cisneros Travel Grant and the Graduate Center. And she also teaches art history classes at Baruch College. Karen Marta is an art books editor and consultant. She is the co-editor of This Must Be the Place with Chia Jojima and has collaborated on publication projects with the curatorial team at the America Society since 2017, inaugurating the gallery's pocketbook series. Karen Marta Editorial Consulting is an independent publications consultancy which partners with art institutions and artists to advise on the overall concept for books, catalogs, and series, their design, production, and possibilities for distribution. Please join me in a round of applause for Karen and Chia. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Of course. Thank you, Lucy, for the introduction. Along with Karen, I am the co-editor of the book that we are celebrating tonight. Editing this book has been a process of so much learning and challenge. The biggest one of those challenges was to find a way to make sense of such vast material. In this book, we have more than 45 artists and many artist collective and initiatives. And the research process was really rewarding because we would start interviewing an artist, and then they would point to other artists and projects that we should include in the book. And by so doing, they began revealing these networks of collaboration, of community that they formed during their time in New York. So to make sense of this vast material, I created a structure for the book, which is divided into 3 chapters. The first one is the city, the second one is community and institutions, and the third one is politics, identity, and the body. And each chapter has an introductory essay that provides the overarching themes and the background information. For instance, in chapter 1 about the city, we try to situate the city as the structuring framework for these artists who had just arrived and began reflecting on the complex realities of New York, both in terms of its physical space, the urban architecture of the city, but also its social dimensions. And by focusing on the city, we were able to shift from the obvious question in this project, what did Latin American artists do in New York, to what did New York do to this artist? And I think that this is a key question that many of us who live in New York and migrated to the city might be asking ourselves, how does this city changes us? And then in chapter 2, focused on community and institutions, we highlight the galleries, artist spaces, and collectives that Latin American artists organized to counter the exclusionary practices of major museums and galleries in New York City in the period. For instance, we highlight the creation of El Museo del Barrio, as well as smaller artist collectives such as the Neurographic Workshop, Taller Boricua, and other initiatives of both creation and exhibition of artworks. And then chapter 3 focuses on politics, identity, and the body, emphasizing these artists' struggle for visibility and representation, as well as their close connections with political initiatives in both the United States and also in Latin America. Most of the artists could be featured in one or all the chapters of the book, but we had to find a balance to, and limit the amount of material that we included. What you see here, the book, could be as well 10 times bigger, because that's probably the amount of material that Mariana Fernandez and I collected during the research for the project, adding to the research that Aimé had already collected in her PhD dissertation. And I would like to acknowledge the fundamental role of Mariana Fernandez, associate editor of the book, in expanding this initial research. Is Mariana here? No? Probably she's online watching us. Thank you, Mariana. But of course, the book is not 10 times bigger, and that was the very difficult editorial process of cutting, adding, selecting, and trying to find quotes and images that could fit within the book structure that Karen and I struggled a lot to achieve. I'm really happy that this book can be experienced in different ways. This is more a book of fruition rather than a book that you read in a linear way with a narrative from beginning to end. A reader can flip through the book and see amazing documentation from archives, images of artworks, and photographs from artists. Many of these images are published for the first time, and have glimpses of these experiences in the period. One could also read the book page by page and potentially find the flow that Karen and I try to convey within this specific organization. Another big challenge, at least for me as a trained art historian who is used to look deeply into, into my personal and academic research, was to acknowledge and accept that the goal of this book was different. This book is expansive, it moves laterally, instead of diving deeply into a single subject or artist. And I remember talking to a dear friend, Bernardo Mosqueira, about this anxiety, and he told me that there is also depth in doing something so expansive and broad. And I think he's right. And this is when I began considering this book a book of hundreds and hundreds of potential dissertations and master theses. Finally, I would like to thank our co-publisher Isla and the team at America Society, and would like to thank especially Aimé for trusting us to edit this project that I know is so important to her. So I hope you enjoy the book as much as we did enjoy preparing it. And now I'm passing the mic to Karen, who will be sharing some thoughts about the oral history part of the book.
Lucy mentioned, I have consulted on publications for the American Society for the last 4 years and edited the books for their exhibitions and created what we call the pocket books, which are really a guide for the exhibition. I've learned so much about Latin American artists, and I'm glad that we, meaning me and my team, have been able to help bring this amazing work to the English-speaking readers. It's been my pleasure to work with this institution in finding unique and compelling ways to tell these urgent stories and histories. But since Taya has explained the book in such great detail, I will restrict myself to only talk a bit about some of the few of the books that influenced and helped us to decide on the structure for This Must Be the Place. It was clear from the very beginning that an oral history would allow us to foreground the artists and their shared experience of coming to New York, while taking full advantage of the extensive primary material that Aimé had been collecting for over a decade, and which led to these 2 wonderful exhibitions at the American Society. As Taya mentioned, in order for the artists to tell their own stories, it meant making space for multiple competing narratives. I'm not sure if everyone here is familiar with this wonderful book by Bruno Manari. It's called Photo Reportage, and subtitled From the Island of Truffles to the Kingdom of Misunderstanding. After World War II, Manari used the exact same journalistic photos to tell multiple fictional stories. Essentially, we embraced his message that multiple narratives are possible using the same materials. And then there was Lucy Lepard's book, 6 Years, The Dematerialization of the Art Object, from 66 to 72, which served as an essential touchstone in our thinking. It showed us how to recreate a particular moment and the discussions around it using primary sources. In this seminal book, Lepard used primary documents, interviews, recordings, with the generation of conceptual artists that emerged in the 60s to show how they had, in just 6 years, irrevocably altered and redefined the critical framework for understanding contemporary art. 6 years, which I'm sure you all are familiar with, is an impressively analog book. Lepard designed each page by hand using scissors and lots of Scotch tape. We knew we wanted our book to have a similar feeling of its moment and to be dense, layered, and interconnected, allowing the reader to feel present in the historical moment. Visually, you can see this in the layered flow of images and interrelated texts. Even though each chapter, as Taya described, is thematically different. The materials were chosen to make the interconnectedness more present. Finally, a book very dear to Aimé and my heart, a book about collab and related activities, published for an exhibition at Printed Matter. The humble materials, the very precise choice of typography used to differentiate the voices, and the jacket, which reveals the portraits of the artists on the verso, is a reminder that a book can recreate a historical moment by embracing it. Designed by Garrett Gott, who also designed This Must Be the Place, this book, which is an oral history told by Collab, the collective of Lower East Side artists which were trying to find a place in New York, mostly in the 90s, brought its moment alive for the reader. This is precisely what we endeavored to do in This Must Be the Place. I have copies of these 3 books in case anyone wants to see them, since there are no slides. I do want to say that a book is the fruit of many working closely together. Taya has thanked the Americas Society. I just want to thank 2 of the team, my team, that worked on this book, both of whom are present. Maddie Gilmore and Megan Madden. Thank you both. Now to the moment we've all been waiting for. Aimé will speak to the artists.
Hello. Is this mic working for Sylvia, or should she? So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for the ones on the back that are in up. We are trying to be safe in our first in-person event after a long, long time. We're very happy to be back in this room, and thank you so much for everybody that came. I will introduce in a second these 2 wonderful artists that are joining us. It is a true honor to have them, Nitza Tufiño and Sylvia Palacios Whitman. And we hope to make this a brief but fun conversation that can hopefully open more conversations that can happen after. In the back, we're going to have a cocktail, so please stay by to cheer with us and to drink with us. I wanted to say a few words about this project and what it involves to us as a team, and if I might, to me personally, I want to start with that at the risk of being a bit egocentric. But this is a project that it's the end of a journey of 12 years for me, and I'm not overreacting when I say 12 years. This started in Buenos Aires when I encountered one publication called the Contrabienal, which was done by a group of artists that were actually protesting the policies of South America. There were so many other projects with artistic and political purpose that were being done in New York by artists that had come from different places of the Americas, and that this topic deserved to be studied. That's, life took me here, and in an ironic and fascinating turn of events, brought me to America Society, where a lot of these artists were doing things or were protesting against back in the 1960s. Era, and so the energy of those gods is here with us. Speaking about that, I do want to say that this book is dedicated to that whole generation, and specifically to those of us that are not with us anymore and who were not able to enjoy the exhibition or to share their testimony, like Nitza and Sylvia today. And for me, if I may, specifically to Jaime David, who is an artist that was not only for me a source of research, but also became a substitute grandfather in the city. And I say this not to be corny, but just because I think it's important to see how these lineages of different generations helping each other and help that we done, and this very thick 450-page research. I do think that the answer to the research question is that that community can be the place and community should be the place. And so yes, so thank you very much to everybody. I wanted to start with Sylvia. Sylvia, you came from Chile. Do you want to tell a little bit about when you came and why and what New York meant for you back in that moment?
Okay, is this on? Yes. Okay, I came to New York in 1960. I was an art student in Santiago, and I married a Chilean artist that was actually my teacher. His name was Enrique Castro Cid. He's also an artist, but he's gone somewhere. And so I've been living in this country for all these years. And I don't know how to explain it. I was into the Chilean way of doing stuff, but as soon as I got here, I met a lot of different people, and I do all the craziness things that I do. And I don't know what else I can tell you. You asked me. What
No, yeah, don't worry. And do you remember your first impression of New York? I mean, because the scale of the city, I can imagine, was so different from Santiago, or, from Chile.
No, I came from Osorno, from the south of Chile, and I was studying art in Santiago, and getting here in 1960, you can imagine, we actually, at the time, we were on our way to Europe, but somehow we stayed in New York City. And immediately we got somehow involved with the arts and with people that were interested in art, and that's how it went. And the rest is my life, and now has changed. Now I've been married for several years with another artist, but it's an American artist called Robert Whitman. And so it's another introduction to something else. But I've been working through all this. I danced with Trisha Brown for a few years, I think 3 years. We were good friends, and at the time, it was more like, I wasn't a dancer really, but I'm already ready to dance. So Trisha says, you want to dance together? And I said, sure, let's dance together. And we did some funny stuff, and then I got more into it, and we did some stuff like that. In fact, and then I got into performances, which I have been doing over the years. My husband, Robert Whitman, is a performing artist too, and when I saw his work and I got involved in performances, I started doing my work as a performer. And that's what I've been doing all along, doing performances. Also, I love, and I've been also interested in art in general. I paint and I draw. And I've been doing some, right now, I'm all into it. I've been doing some enormous floor drawings that I have to show.
Beautiful ones.
And I will show them here at a certain point soon.
Very soon. Very soon.
And I keep performing. I've been showing my work all over, in Europe, in London, in Germany, in Austria, all over the place, and in New York too. And that's what I can tell you about my work. And if anybody wants to ask me anything, you're welcome to do it.
Yes. I wanted to ask to Nitza, because another important thread, the same way that the story of Sylvia, coming to New York is a repeated story that you'll see throughout the book, which is like the different impressions that the city calls upon these artists when they arrive from different parts of the America. But there's another very important thread that I mentioned already, which is the thread of community and, and how, artists created networks of, action, solidarity, friendship, And Nitza grew up in one of them, so I thought it was amazing if she could talk a little bit about that, what it meant to.
Well, the thing is that I was born in Mexico. My mother was Mexican. My father is Puerto Rican, but actually he's a New Yorican because he was born in the Navy Yard in Brooklyn. And then when he was 10, he was taken to Puerto Rico, and that's where he made his career, and he was a soldier and all of that. His name is Tufiño. And then later with the GI Bill, he went to Mexico, and that's how I was born. He met my mother there. She was a dancer and a model for Diego Rivera and other artists in Mexico. And I was born, so I was given an American citizenship, and I had my Mexican citizenship, came to the United States for a year, and then we moved to Puerto Rico. And then after that, I kept traveling back and forth from New York to Puerto Rico. So being involved with an artist, I was always close to community and to become an artist. So then I went to San Carlos University in Mexico. And then coming back from San Carlos, and even a little bit before that, I realized what type of work I want to do. My artwork, I want to do murals, I want to do printmaking, I want to do all that. But the fact that I come from a colony, which is called Puerto Rico, and it belongs to the United States, there was a lot of activism and pro-independence that we wanted to do, and we had to do solidarity with other Latin American countries, because the United States had made Puerto Rico the window into Latin America. That is a fact. So during all that period, I always had that thing with my work, whether I do activism with my work as art, or I get myself involved with community and try to create organizations and non-for-profit to help the people and to help other artists, and also to help other Latin American artists that were living and other artists that were coming either from France, India, or Africa, and how we could help them to stay in the United States either through visas or helping them getting jobs and things like that. So El Taller was created in 1969 because we were part also of the Young Lords. The Young Lords, were the activists in that sense. So we created Taller Boricua as an outpost of social justice in the arts. And then, but before Taller Boricua existed, there was an organization called Friends of Puerto Rico, who Carlos Irizarry, who you have a piece downstairs, he was very big in activism also, and he was pro-independence and the situation of Puerto Rico. He did a lot of that work, and he was also a conceptual artist. So he was in this organization working. They gave him studios. Her name was Amalia Guerrero. She was the dancer. She created this organization. There was also Domingo Lopez, who was a conceptual artist. All these artists were very well welcome, and the person who wrote a lot about them was the Chilean critic, Marta Traba. Marta Traba was
Wonderful.
very, very important in Puerto Rico and in helping these artists to connect them to the conceptual art also in Latin America and here in the United States. So there were a few exhibits that were done on 57th Street with Tibor de Nagui. There were like two galleries. And also there was another gallery called Bonino, which later caducó. But Friends of Puerto Rico did continue, and then later became Cayman Gallery, which was in Soho. All these things were activism by the part of the artists to go to different places. So if we were in El Barrio and we were creating art in El Barrio and we were not being heard by the system and the other museums, like at one point, El Taller went and they took over Hovink's office. And then they were escorted out through the back because it was very embarrassing. So there's different ways to do the artwork as an artist, whether you want to do it directly in the art or you want to create activism. So El Taller did that. Also, we created El Museo del Barrio. I was one of the founders. Then later on, Cayman Gallery, we also did for Rolando La Teller, which he was Chilean, and he was killed He was an ambassador to Chile, and they had put a bomb in Washington, D.C., okay? So we, the Puerto Ricans and some of the Latin American, we got together and we created like a fund and also trying to help Allende. I think Allende was still alive. But then after he got killed, his wife and his daughter moved to the States and we held them with Alarcón. He just passed away about 4 or 5 days ago, who was the prime minister in Cuba, and they moved to Cuba. So we did also the Solidarity concert in Madison Avenue with Pete Seeger. Pete Seeger was a very, very big thing with Latin America and also with Nicaragua.
Sylvia, you were there, right? I think
What?
you were there at the Madison Square Garden
Yes.
concert, right?
Yes.
You were there that day.
Yeah.
So all
Absolutely.
of these things is like, this is how you create, I mean, it depends from your heart, not only using the brush and your tools and all of that, how you create a sense of community. A sense of community, a sense of family, and bringing all the arts in music, in dance, in performance, and all of that. But the well-being and the healthiness of un pueblo, el pueblo que habla en español.
Yes.
Because that's the other
That's
thing.
great.
That's the
And
other
portuñol.
thing that we fought for and we've been fighting. That's how bilingual education came about, thanks to the Puerto Ricans. So anyway, I don't want to take over. I think that I made you ask
No,
more
no, no.
questions and then we can go
No,
on.
thank you, Nitza. This is
I think
fascinating.
you're absolutely wonderful. I mean, to all people, what you've been doing, I think it's amazing.
And we have to
Personally,
continue.
let's
We
do
have to
something.
continue. The thing is that we need young people because
What?
we have to create that
Yes.
chain, not only with the with the work, so that the work doesn't get stagnated, but to embrace them and to really work with them. And the young artists and all of that, you know, we need to do that, and we need to create that, and we need to create that sense through the family, the children, young people, you know what I mean?
And Nitza, if I may,
Politics is
Yeah,
very
yeah.
important.
it's very important,
sorry.
and to being an artistic element to politics and a political element to art. But sorry that I'm interrupting you. Just to highlight what you just said, I do want to come back in 1 second and make a question to you. So about how you two see the new art scene in which we have the Latinx movement and so many younger artists. I'll go to there in a moment, but I want to comment one thing about what you just said. And I do want to bring up that, you know, this is a generational process, and I guess I'm part of the younger generations, but I'm not as young anymore. As you might also notice, I'm about to pass to,
Well, young.
I'm gonna have I have a younger thing inside of me right now. So, uh, for those on the streaming, I'm very pregnant. In case it's not noticeable, it probably is, even at distance.
Surprise, surprise.
Yes. No, but I do want to say something about this generational exchange. And I think something interesting is that for those of us who, I came to age to study art history in a moment where Latin American conceptual art from the 1960s was like really super trendy. It was becoming like the one important thing. There was a whole new field about abstract Latin American art and specifically conceptual Latin American art from the 50s, 60s onwards up to the 70s. And, you know, and we received an enormous legacy of like amazing scholars that had studied this period and that had identified in particular, you know, the political element of conceptual Latin American art and how much conceptual Latin American art had been able to discuss politics in a way that hadn't happened with American or European conceptual art, not as overtly. And I think something fantastic that we discover in this research is that that was true, but also something fantastic that you all did and your generation did is that this conceptual Latin American art was political in effective ways, not simply discussing politics in the traditional way of like denouncing the bad things about politics in the traditional way, but also in creating networks of friendship, in discussing identity, in talking about, you know, sentimental hardship, you know, and in talking about the fluxing identity of the migrant person. You see that specifically in this community of artists that had came from all over the continent, precisely because they had migrated, precisely because they had to, or they had been segregated and because they had to do community. So this affective character of conceptual Latin American art is something that I think is very noticeable and very interesting, and that we should study it more. And what you said, you know, all these like different connections of the networks, you know, the different networks, the different communities. You know, this is not one community, but multiple communities that were in touch with each other, that were helping each other, that were trying to find a place, a space. So it's fantastic you said that. But now back to the question, and maybe we can make this our last question, and everybody can keep chatting and discussing this with Nitza and with Sylvia while we have a drink and we celebrate. But my last question is about the future, or today are the younger people that you said we need. How do you see the present moment, these new movements of Latinx artists, like connecting the new spaces, the new grants, the new identification that they can find?
I mean, I'm really like the Latinx, the new generation, the immigrants, you know, the Salvador, you know, Mexican, you know, Argentinian, very young, you know, that have come here and they don't have paper, the dreamers, and how they're going to school and they are creating all this new work of art with their experiences of their life, which is very different from what we were doing, it was being done before. You know, I mean, like this is now, they sort of like have come into a season kind of situation, and they are making this artwork going into another direction. I mean, I saw, you know, like, I love what El Museo is doing with the new biennials. We're bringing them from all over, and that we're not only presenting New York, you know, Chicago, California, and all of that, the whole nation, because we're all spread out all over the place. But the young people, I mean, how they are creating from new materials, bringing new material, found materials, and the experiences of their immigration and the different works that they're doing is really amazing. It's amazing. It's great. It's really fantastic where we're going. I mean, we're not stagnated. We're moving. We're moving. And whether they have the papers or don't have the paper or whatever, when you're an artist, nothing can stop you.
Anyway, I think with that, maybe we can take 2-3 questions from the audience. If anybody has one question that they would like them to answer collectively, we can also, as I said, informally chat.
Okay, so maybe we can ask a question.
If you have a question.
This gentleman here with the glasses, I would like to know your name and how are you involved in the arts, and what were you expecting when you came to the CITES?
If you want.
Hello, Richard.
Collect art. And I like very different genres and mediums of art, and I've always been interested in the programs they've had here,
Okay,
and I'm very fond of a lot of Latin American art.
that's wonderful.
So that is what has brought me here today.
Okay, all right. The lady with you that I met downstairs, that you said that you were reading about the show. Tell your story. Tell them what happened.
I happen to have a lot of lithographs that are mainly Latin and South American, though I'm of Italian background and I'm American born. And one of them is Liliana Porter. When I saw her name, it's not signed, but it could be that you can't see it in the frame. But most of the artists are not names that probably would recognize, and maybe at some point I'd like to send you names of the art I have, and maybe they're Latin American and South American artists that deserve more attention.
And let this girl do the work.
Again, thank you so much. Yes, and I mean, and something that I think Tia mentioned, but maybe, you know, is something to highlight truly. I mean, that we really took a risk here when we did this exhibition and this book. We really took a risk, and we wanted to take that risk, and we wanted to include as much as possible, open up as much as possible, and make sure that we were not closing any path. It would have been much easier to make a smaller exhibition with less artists, with a more cohesive narrative, but we truly took a chance. I do want to highlight specifically the work of Chia, Natalia, Rachel, and Mariana Fernandez, who were part of the curatorial team in that regard, and Karen pushing us, and also the support of the institutions at America Society and of ISLA. And everybody was take a risk. Everybody was telling us, go further. And when you take a risk, you also leave a lot of incomplete stories, because the problem is that this generation's stories are completely untold. So or very partially told. So the effort of making this collective endeavor was to make sure that everybody can see all the gaps, so that people can fill up the gaps. And that might not be us, that might be other people, younger researchers. I don't think I'm gonna be writing about this for a while, otherwise my family is gonna kill me. But yes, hopefully this is the beginning of a lot more. And thank you so much for bringing it up, and hopefully we can create space, for more community. So with that, I think we can open to the celebration and the drinks, and that I hope you can stay with us for a cheer, and we can ask more questions to the artists, and thank you.